Hey, welcome back, MobilityWOD. So we're sitting here working on the book. Glenn and I are talking about range of motion. And one of the questions that comes up all the time is, Kelly, how much range of motion do I need? Well, look, this is a big conversation because this is the kind of the holy Bible for physical therapists. This is Norkin and White. This is the standard for joint measurements from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, from the American Medical Association, the AMA, physical therapists. Basically, they show what is normal range of motion for the joints and how to measure it. Like this is basically the Bible of what we call misplaced precision. And here's the problem: is that if I'm looking at range of motion, the question is how much range of motion do I need? Right? I'm talking about ROM, range of motion. The issue is that if I get stuck into testing passive range of motion, or even active range of motion, those are just correlates for the big show. And the big show is movement. So the problem is, anytime I look at any of these kind of passive range of motion structures, it doesn't express what's really important, which is, do I have enough range of motion and the motor control to express correct movement? And this is the idea. So, if you come over here, take a look. This is the book here. And if I look at, I've benchmarked here, hip range of motion. It's interesting is that, hey, you should have this much hip range of motion. Here's where you put the goniometer. You're all set. Well, it turns out they're saying 122 degrees from ages 25 to 39. Don't you think normal range of motion is actually expressed best in squatting down? And the question is, can you and do you have enough range of motion and the strength and motor control to express that in actual movement? It's strange how much this looks like a deep normal squat, doesn't it? So we flip that over and you're like, oh, okay, that's just one example. Let's flip over to this one. Oh, full flexion. You should be able to basically have 90 plus degrees, right? You can see how much range of motion here, 142 degrees and guess what that looks like? That looks like being able to squat all the way down and being able to actually have overpressure in the knee. I should not only have full range of motion, but I should be able to be overpressed in this bottom position to be able to kind of say I have normal range of motion. Come back over here for a second, right? You know all of your normal ranges of motion, and that normal range of motion is expressed in language of movement, the language of strength and conditioning. So what we keep saying, you're not normal unless you can express in the language of movement, the language of strength and conditioning, which is squatting, pressing, deadlifting, pulling. Here's two ideas. People get obsessed with the length of their hamstrings. I think we've got a hamstring one in here. Right? First of all, is that muscle length we know is a complex phenomenon based on joint position of the hip, muscle tissue stiffness, how well an athlete braces, the kind of neural dynamics of the spine. And literally the last thing that we look at is what we think is potentially range of motion of these kind of posterior tissues. Once we address hip capsule range, muscle stiffness, all these other issues, magically, hip range of motion or hamstring range of motion usually improves. And this is a system including the fascia, the connective tissue here. Rarely is it just purely a single muscle that I'm measuring. But it's interesting that if this is what we're saying is defined as normal range of motion, right, isn't that a strangely similar correlate for what? Being able to maintain braced spinal position and getting into a good deadlifting position. This is roughly the same amount of range of motion expressed. I should easily be able to get down with shins vertical and grab the bar. Athlete's range of motion means I have to be expressed that with stable torso without challenging my midline stabilization, and I should be able to reach down and touch the bar with legs straight, which we've talked about before. Once again, this kind of notion of just passive range of motion without the context, it just ends up being correlates for things that we're really trying to measure in the first place, which is what? Squatting, running, deadlifting, pressing, all of those things. So take a look over here, because we see this all the time. This is the Bible and the gold standard, right? Well, if you take a look at this foot position, we're being measured in a collapsed foot position. The foot is turned out, and the ankle is actually collapsed in this position. So we'll see these kind of type 1 measurements. My favorite, let's see if we can find it really quickly here, is the shoulder. I think we marked it. Nope. Stand by. If we can find it real quick here, we'll pull it up. If not, no big deal. Because it's so gross, it makes me cringe a little bit when I see it. Well, we'll pass it. What ends up happening is in this book, they measure full internal rotation, and guess what? They're measuring with the shoulder in the dreaded douchebag position. The problem is that the language of this range of motion, again, hasn't been expressed in the way we actually train or in actual function. And we know this is not a very functional position. So we need to understand that once I put into context what's really happening, then I can start to make decisions. How much ankle range of motion do I need? Well, literally, I can't think of any range or sport that requires basically more range of motion than being able to overpress, feet together or very close together, knees forward. This is how much ankle range of motion you need. So if you can't get into those shapes that look like movements, we've got a problem. Dip now expresses shoulder extension. The 60 degrees that I'm supposed to have is best expressed with what? Ending up with the shoulder below the elbow in a full dip. Ah, boom. So the key is, as you're thinking about range of motion, really the issue is, can I express the normal excursion of my tissues as a system with the underlying motor control in these full range of movements that define me as normal? Food for thought. Norkin and White, you had something going there, you just didn't complete the idea. I'll see you guys tomorrow.